lot of 45 Below associates have been sent to prison or faced criminal charges. When when Representative Chris Collins, a Republican from New York, stands before a judge for sentencing today, the congressman who was once the first to stand up and endorse the then Squatter 45 during the 2016 election is likely to face prison time, having pleaded guilty to charges related to securities fraud, conspiracy, and making false statements and resigning from his post last year. Collins is just the latest in a series of close allies and associates to that was blowing 45 to face the stain of criminal records, and all 14 people that were blowing 45 and bouncing up and down on his dick that were donors and advisors have been indicted or imprisoned since the days when the first-time candidate promised that he would hire only the best people. The squatters are surrounded by tens of thousands of supporters and hire hundreds of aides into various jobs, so it may be inevitable that some tiny fraction of them will run afoul of the law. But experts say 45 is amassing a record unusual for an American squatter, and that so many senior advisors have come under legal scrutiny. Yeah, a lot of the people that he hired basically didn't have any experience in whatever fields they were doing. The count includes senior members of 45's campaign staff, including former campaign manager and chair Paul Manafort and his deputy Rick Gates, both snared on financial misdeeds in Special Counsel Robert Mueller investigation. 45's first national security advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, though he has recently moved to retract his plea. His personal attorney, Dumbass Giuliani, is under criminal investigation for his big man arrested in an alleged campaign finance scheme, according to sources. Both Dumbass Giuliani associates have pleaded not guilty. White House did not respond to ABC's news request for comment, and the 45 campaign declined to comment. Collins is one of the two earliest 45 blowers in Congress, and both have recently been convicted in federal prosecutions. Former Representative Duncan Hunter, a Republican from California, who had the distinction of being the second congressman to blow 45, stepped down from his seat earlier this week after pleading guilty last month to conspiring to misuse $250,000 of campaign funds for his own personal use. The California Republican is slated to be sentenced in March. At the time of Collins and Hunter's indictments in 2018, 45 responded in a tweet blaming then Attorney General Jeff Sessions and the Justice Department for bringing investigations of two very popular Republican congressmen to a well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms. Two easy wins now in doubt because there is not enough time, he added, and 45 has seen some of his donors ensnared in criminal probes. Washington-based lobbyist Sam Patton pleaded guilty to illegally funneling foreign money into 45's inaugural committee, as well, and was sentenced to 3 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, and 500 hours of community service. As the squatter's personal lawyer, Dumbass Giuliani, at that time downplayed Patton's association with 45, saying 45 has no idea who these contributors are. Actually, he does. New England Patriots owner Bob Kraft, a close personal friend of 45, a Mar-a-Lago member, and who gave $1 million to the inaugural committee, is currently fighting misdemeanor charges in Florida related to soliciting prostitution. Kraft has pleaded not guilty to the charges. George Nader, a Lebanese-American businessman and lobbyist with ties to the 45 World and a key witness in the Mueller investigation, recently pleaded guilty to charges related to child sex trafficking and possession of child pornography. He was also charged last month in connection to an alleged scheme to funnel millions of illegal campaign contributions to political entities supporting Clinton during the 2016 election. California-based Ahmad Zuberi, who gave $900,000 to the 45 inaugural committee, was indicted last October for allegedly making illegal foreign straw donation, violating foreign lobbying laws and evading taxes. The allegations against Zuberi don't allege any wrongdoing by 45 or his campaign. Last week, federal prosecutors added obstruction of justice to Zuberi's indictment, accusing him of taking numerous steps to thwart the federal criminal investigation. Upon learning of that, Zuberi has pleaded guilty. Zuberi was a major donor for Hillary Clinton and former President Barack Obama. 45 is by no means the only squatter who has been associated with criminals. The Watergate burglary, which led to Richard Nixon's downfall, resulted in a number of Nixon associates, including his campaign operative Gordon Liddy, being convicted. Bill Clinton pardoned his brother Roger, who was convicted of cocaine possession in the 80s, and on his last day in office, Clinton made the controversial decision to pardon financier Mark Rich, who had fled overseas to escape indictment for alleged criminal financial crimes. In 2009, a top donor to Democrats John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama, New York financier Hassan Namazi was sent to prison after being charged with financial crimes. To 45's critics, though, the charges being brought against his advisors have been viewed as a symptom of something concerning. Watchdog group Citizens of Responsibility and Ethics and Washington's policy director Jennifer Ahearn said she worries about the tone from the top. Would he issue pardons to help these very people and avoid the consequences of their actions, she asked. Would he interfere in Justice Department or other enforcement actions against them? These could be additional serious ethics problems on top of all the troubling conduct we've already seen. But supporters of the squatter say he has been the target of unprecedented scrutiny, a phenomenon epitomized by the Mueller probe. Larry Schweikart, I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right, an American historian and retired history professor at the University of Dayton, who wrote a book called 48 Liberal Lies About American History, said he viewed the Mueller indictments were a product of a systematical prosecution. Special Counsel Robert Mueller's 22-month-long investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election resulted in at least six convicted felons in the squatter's close orbit. Manafort was found guilty on a slew of financial crime charges related to his lobbying work in Ukraine and is currently serving an 81-month prison sentence. Meanwhile, Gates, who had struck a plea deal early in the case, was recently sentenced to 36 months probation and 45 days in jail after cooperating with the government as a key witness for nearly 2 years. The squatter's former longtime fixer and personal attorney Michael Cohen is also serving 3 years in prison after pleading guilty to making false statements to Congress in a case brought by Mueller's team, as well as a separate campaign finance and tax crime case brought by federal prosecutors in Manhattan. Most recently, veteran operative and longtime 45 blower Roger and Bread Redneck Stone was found guilty on all 7 charges related to his false statements to Congress, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering, and is now waiting a prison sentence. And General Flynn, who was among the first individuals to strike a plea deal with Mueller's team after being charged with making false statements to investigators, is now awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for January 28th. Flynn is now looking to withdraw his guilty plea. The 45 campaign former foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos, convicted of lying to investigators, spent 2 weeks in prison. But several investigators actively targeting 45 associates, the trend lines for his administration shows no sign of abating. Prosecutors in the Southern District of New York indicted 2 associates of 45 personal attorney Rudy Giuliani, Le Parnas, and Igor Fruman, accusing them of circumventing election laws that prohibit straw donations and foreign contributions to federal political campaigns, including a super PAC supporting the squatter 45's re-election campaign. Both men have pleaded not guilty in the case. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan are also investigating whether there was any criminality in the business relationship between Dumbass Giuliani and the 2 Florida men who were also embroiled in the congressional impeachment inquiry as key players in Dumbass Giuliani's efforts to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden in Ukraine, sources told ABC News. Parnas has been complying with at least some of House investigators' requests by submitting documents and data, but Fruman has yet to answer the investigators. Last year, the squatter's inaugural committee was hit with sweeping requests for documents from federal prosecutors in New York and New Jersey Attorney General's office, and the outcome of the case remains unknown. In October, a lobbyist with close ties to 45 saw his firm hit with subpoenas for records. Professor Nancy Kassup of the Political Science Department at the State University of New York at New Paltz and a researcher at the White House Transition Program told ABC News she believes 45 is finding such a large number of criminally charged associates that compromise administration officials that have been forced to resign amid scandals most likely can be attributed to exceptionally poor vetting, if any, during the hiring process. Critics have called into questioning 45's team's vetting process for top officials during the early stage of the administration. And last year, leaked 45 transition vetting documents showed a host of top officials with problematic issues in their background that raised red flags, according to Axios. Some other experts, on the contrary, say recent past administrations have faced fewer criminal charges than 45 because prosecutors were not as aggressive. I don't think 45 is a particularly virtuous individual. I just don't see him as being worse than some of his predecessors, said Paul Gottfried, an American historian and editor-in-chief of the Chronicles magazine. Yeah, but I said a lot of these 45 blowers. But a lot of these 45 blowers are basically being charged with crimes, and that's funny as hell.